Hi guys, it's Mrs. Brown. I thought I would take this opportunity when we are not in school to share some nature with you guys. I'm out here in the woods at some family property, and I wanted to talk about the word ephemeral today. If you've never heard that word before, ephemeral means something that's passing, that doesn't last very long. I think it's appropriate for the time that we're in. The strange times we have where we're not in school and everybody has to stay home. It feels right now like it's taking forever, but hopefully in the years when we look back on it, it'll feel like it was ephemeral. But what I want to talk about with ephemeral today out here in the woods is spring wildflowers. If you've had me for biology, you know that everything that's alive competes with other living things. And out here in the woods, one of the things that the plants compete for is light, sunlight. So the trees, as you know, are the dominant species, and throughout most of the year they are really taking up a lot of the light. That's why you like to go in the woods when it's a hot day, because it's nice and shady and cool. So if you're going to compete with the trees for sunlight, one of the ways you can do that is to come out early in the spring and take care of your flowering and your seeding before the leaves get on the trees. So some of my favorite ephemeral spring wildflowers are blooming today, and I just wanted to point some out to you. Maybe you've been familiar with them, maybe you've never heard of them before. Because they're ephemeral, I always like to get out and see them when they're out, because I know they're not going to last very long. The one that I'm sitting right in front of right here is a really fun one. It's called Dutchman's Britches, which is a funny name. If you look really closely at the flowers, it sort of looks like some of those old-fashioned pantaloons hanging on a clothesline, which is why I think that they have that name. So they are very abundant right now in the forest floor, and some of them, if this is a south-facing slope, so they're blooming right now. Some of the ones that are up above aren't blooming quite yet, but you can still see the foliage. And then right close by here is another, and this is really like the first ephemeral wildflower that you usually will see in the woods, and it's called Spring Beauty. These are closed right now because the sun's not hitting them fully, but when they open up, they actually have a really pretty little pinkish purple center with white on the outside of the flower. Again, these are some of our earliest wildflowers that come out, and they don't last very long. So if you have a chance to get outside, if you have a little patch of woods, you might find some of these spring ephemerals to look at. Another one of the spring ephemerals that you're likely to see out in the woods if you're able to get out are these. These are called May apples, and they're not, these right here are not all the way out yet. They're just coming up. When they grow, they're going to be a bit taller than this, and these leaves will spread out sort of like this. You've probably seen these before. They tend to grow in patches like this. They're a little bit better at competing for sunlight as the leaves are starting to get on the trees, because they're able to spread their leaves out nice and flat to catch that sunlight. And an interesting thing about the May-apples is their flower is underneath those leaves. So if you're looking, right now these don't have flowers yet. So if you're looking for May-apple flowers, you kind of have to bend over or move the leaves aside to find them. And the reason they have the name May-apple is they actually produce a fruit that sort of looks like a small apple, and it also hangs down below the leaves like that. Because you know that if you have a fruit, you had a flower. And so whenever you see a plant with a fruit, you know that they had a flower in that spot earlier in the year. So another ephemeral that I wanted to talk to you about is one that grows out in more grassy areas, not in the woods. This lowly little flower here is called Draba, and it's one of those plants that would be beneath our notice often. It's very small, very unassuming, just growing out here in the grassy lane. But it has a place in the ecosystem. And again, it's trying to take this early part of the spring to get its flowers out, start producing its seeds. to compete with this grass that's going to be taller before long. Here's another spring ephemeral that is fun to find in the woods. These again are not all the way up and they're not blooming yet. They're red trilliums and they have a really deep red flower. They're called trillium because everything they have is in threes, like their leaves and their flower petals. Interesting about these particular plants, they have a flower that doesn't smell nice, at least not in human perspective, and they're actually pollinated by flies because they have sort of a bad smell to them, or like a rotting smell. So I wouldn't recommend smelling them, but they are really interesting to see. They have really pretty leaves. Again, they're only out in the forest here in the early spring, and then they're gone until next year. So if you can get a chance to check them out, they're really cool.